Hey guys, somebody's gone here. Today we're going to be looking at a little bit different of a VOD review. Typically I do some of the top players that finished during events, but this is going to be how they could have qualified for the FNCS Grand Finals. There's still a chance that he can qualify through the reboot round, but Toose had a terrible day one and then a great day two and just barely missed qualifying. So we're going to go ahead, look at game one, see what he could have done differently to give him the qualifying spot in the FNCS Grand Finals. But essentially what we're going to be talking about today is, one, he's super passive on early to mid game rotations, which could be a good thing, but when you're not placing very highly in these games, you need to find points somehow. So that could be through elims in the early to mid game. Secondly, he gets kind of tunnel visioned at times. He sees a player shoots at him, and he'll stay focused on that player, but then not be able to move on and get a good grip of what's going on around him. Another reason is he lands agency, gets the drum gun, but honestly, he plays better in games when he doesn't have the drum gun. He doesn't use the drum gun to its full capacity, and I think he'd honestly be better off either holding an AR because he uses it instead of an AR, or just leaving the drum gun at the agency and hiding it. Then third, he has a tendency in mid-game to go to a building and replace the building, which is great, but he will stay inside that building and not get a large amount of information around him. So he's limited in his vision and information for further rotates. So those are some of the key things. We'll look at a few more, but let's get to some examples. Here's an example of the passive play and not using the drum gun to its full ability. So if I'm using the drum gun during mid game, I at least want to put myself next to players so I can try and pressure them and possibly get in a box. Now, without being on top of someone and being a few, like 30 or so meters away, that drum gun's not going to be used as best it can. It's not really going to be great to get tags on players rotating. You can, but it's not going to be super large amounts of damage, nor are you going to be able to get an elim. So in this early to mid game, you got to box up in places where you're going to be able to use that drum gun, and being by yourself is going to be a difficult place to do so. Now again, another example is going to be here when Toose is built up on a high-ish position. I don't believe he's full high ground in this zone, but at least this part of zone, he's going to be one of the highest. Holding this position is going to be extremely difficult trying to pressure with this drum gun. Anyone at a distance is not really going to respect that drum gun, nor can you be super accurate when taking shots. You're relying on bloom and hoping that you hit a few. A mid-ground layer or even bottom layer, but bottom is going to be desperate, are going to be better to play it with the drum gun. Height, you're not really going to be able to take full advantage of that high ground position. So we'll see him do this in a couple of games, and it definitely could have helped him play better if he played to the strengths of the drum gun as opposed to playing higher up than he does. Another bad choice that Toose makes in this first game is going to be his layer here. You don't want to be on ultimate low unless you have to be. He's good on materials, good on heals, and he should at least be playing mid ground right now. It would be a little more acceptable to play low ground later in the game, or if he was going to play more aggressively with that drum gun, but he does neither, and because he's on ultimate low, people are being forced to make plays, and Toose becomes one of those people who falls victim to someone trying to make a play. In this rotate, we're going to see Toose get tunnel visioned 2 separate times. So one time, there'll be a player that he sees or fires at him on the left that he will continuously watch, and then after that, still knowing that there's going to be a player on the left, another player on the right will start shooting at him. So see, look at this. He pays full attention to this player on the left, which awesome. You should know when players are around you and you should build accordingly. but he has no idea what's going on to the right, and it could have caused him to get hit. Luckily, he sees it right before, but now again, fully focused on the player on the right instead of looking at the left and behind him when he knows that there was just a player there. So it's these examples of tunnel vision that can cost you in games. It doesn't wind up costing him here, but a player behind him, a player he wasn't looking at, could have easily tagged him up pretty big and then cost more shield, more heals, more materials. You got to be more aware of everything that's going on around you. So here's something you normally wouldn't think is an issue. Toose is just going to sit in this box almost the entire zone and rarely gain information about what's going on fully around him. Only at one point in time does he look at one single wall, one single direction to gain information. And yes, he is refarming materials, but he's already maxed. He doesn't need to continue to grab these materials. He gains nothing from it besides control over this area. What you should be doing in this position is gaining more information about the players around you, your potential rotates, and how you can move between these boxes, get elims, because sitting in a house and replacing, while if zone falls on your head, that's going to be awesome, but most likely and more often, you're going to run into times when you don't get zone, and just wasting minutes without gaining information of what's going on around you is going to wind up costing you. This right here is all about your material economy and spending mats in a useful manner. So the wood here, no big deal. I understand you got to use wood. You got to protect yourself on a rotate. He's even going to be able to refresh some. But on this rotate, he's going to build 2 boxes, one right now. And then he'll build another one in brick here later. And metal that I just don't understand. He's wasting 2 builds or 2 full boxes of builds that could potentially be used later on in the game. And he's not even in zone yet. The use of metal here, especially when you know it's temporary, does you no good. So you got to be understanding where zone is, how far you actually need to rotate, and don't waste builds on your way into zone that you don't need to. You should be using wood to rotate, and if you get pressured, switch to harder materials, but don't box up and, you know, waste hard mats when you're not even going to let those hard mats fully get built and be able to take advantage of their extra health. He does this a couple times, and I find it fairly strange, where he'll build a box on his rotate towards zone, and then those materials will wind up going to waste. But another thing that's weird is when he's going for this refresh here, he's cheap on those materials. So he spends materials on the rotate, but something that could potentially get him a refresh is not well played. You would think you're going to cover all sides. You're going to be getting a refresh here, so you know you can spend those extra materials. You know there's going to be mats on this body, and he already has a good bit of mats anyway. You know, you have to cover all sides. Granted, scuffing that edit kind of screws him, but he still leaves his back wide open when he knows this is a pack zone. I mean, if we just look at the map in the bottom right corner, look at how many players are in this area. You have to know, especially when other people are shooting at this guy that you just got an elim on, that there's going to be other people around you, and you have to play this more carefully. If you're going to go for that refresh, spend the materials, don't get greedy and die to extra greed. This is going to be another example of Toose building a full metal box just to leave the box shortly after. The position he's in is fine, and he probably is okay to stay there, but for some reason he decides to continue to rotate after spending, let's say, 7 metal builds. When you're investing those kinds of heavy mats, you have to stick with those decisions, or you have to be able to not invest those materials, right? Because now he just rotated away, that metal box is there, but it does him no good, and he just spent those mats that he can't get back. Game 4 is played much better by Toose, but he makes a really bad decision in endgame when he could have gotten much further into this match. So let's look at his mats. He has 80 builds, has a launch pad, has 5 fish, 2 big pots. There's absolutely no need to go for a refresh at this point. You can get so much deeper into the game if you just rotate into this zone. You drop a pad, you go look for another pad. There's 37 people left, easily getting top 30, maybe even top 20, top 25, without even needing a refresh, anything else like that. But for some reason, he decides to go for a play, which I'm sure we've all done. Like, he cracks a player here and then decides to chase. But this is a stacked zone, a stacked game. You need to be careful chasing plays like this. And at this point, he has a chance to back out. Like, he easily could have backed out. The player he's chasing had time to pop at least 1 mini by this point. It's time to move. You have to rotate zones at your back. There's no need to continue to chase this Elim. All you did was crack the player. As far as you know, he still has at least 100 HP. So it's greed that gets to him in the end. And, yes, it's 4 points. But because he's putting himself in these positions, because he's chasing a player, Sweezy doesn't know who the player got cracked is. He heard that fight right in front of him, and he heard a player get cracked, but he doesn't know whether it was Toose or whether it was Verse, the guy who was chasing. So when Sweezy has an opportunity to take some shots, he will. Here's the unfortunate part. Once you get the shield crack, all the vultures hop in on you. And now Toose goes down to Verse, who he was chasing initially. So focus, rotate. If you can get pump shots, get damage on players, awesome. Don't chase fights. Do not chase fights in moving zones because it will lead to your death. It does you no good unless you're absolute shambles. But you should be setting up plays to get yourself in those positions. And if you take enough shots at people while rotating, you will get refreshes easily. You don't need to chase kills because typically people are going to be weak, and if you're doing the right things, refreshes will come to you.